So this is going to be putting the aircraft carriers, both American and Japanese aircraft carriers, unknown to each other in very close proximity of each other. So with these guys coming around the Solomon Islands, the American carriers, meanwhile, they're south of the Solomon Islands. They're between the Solomons and Australia, further south. Now, this sets up the stage for the world's first carrier battle ever. And the
I can almost hear the Clint Eastwood. Boo, boo, boo.
Yeah, yeah. So like something's going way out.
It's like a Western showdown, like a high noon quick draw thing almost, dude. You can feel it coming. It's building towards that.
And really, whoever draws first has the major advantage,
right?
Because they're going to shoot first, they're going to launch first, and find the other guys first to actually strike their carriers and fleet there. Now, the Japanese invasion force, they captured Tulagi. This is going to be May 4th to the 5th. It's a very small island just north of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. Now, the Yorktown alone is going to kind of like surprise these Japanese invaders on that island with a strike. And
well, let's get into that a little bit. Let's set the stage as to why. Now, the Lexington is sent to join the Yorktown, and we'll get into the commanders of the two different carrier groups here. They eventually combine into one task force.
Yeah.
But Admiral Fletcher is in charge of the Yorktown at this point.
Yes.
The Lexington has to refuel.
Yes.
So while that's refueling, he thinks, let me see where the enemy is and what they're doing, thinking that the Lexington's going to be able to link up with them very soon after.
Yeah.
Because they just need to finish refueling and then they can come and join.
Right. So he heads north and into the night of, from the night of the 4th into the early morning hours of the 5th, they go up there, they launch planes and really kind of surprise that force there. And the Japanese are completely just caught off guard. Like, whoa, there's an aircraft carrier here. There's American fighters in the air.
Because again, up to this point, they had no clue.
They had no clue. They may have had an idea like something was somewhere, but not about to be right on their heels here.
Which Admiral Fletcher does get a little flack for this decision to go attack Tulagi. But I think that at the time, given what he knew, it was a necessary decision to make. It also does take out some of their capabilities. I mean, they are successful in taking out some of the landing force that's assaulting Tulagi.
Yeah.
But he's given away the element of surprise.
He's given away the element of surprise, and at this time, he still does not know that two large aircraft carriers from Japan are coming around. They're still coming around the Solomon Islands. They still have no idea of that. They think they're hitting what they're hitting is the only thing kind of in that area. So because of this, there's going to be obviously a lot of scouting. They're going to be looking for each other because they know each other's in the area, but where exactly? So Fletcher, he makes his attack and he kind of retires back further south, and they link up with join the aircraft carrier fleets again. And at this point, it's like Fletcher will, at this time, what they seem to find or scout or discover would be, let's head northwest towards Port Moresby, because that's where we think the invasion fleet's going to come from. We just kind of hit these guys up over here, and we're going to head this way. Meanwhile, these two Japanese carriers have made their way around the Solomon Islands, and they're behind the American fleet now. So these guys are scouting. Everybody's scouting. Everybody's got planes up in the air, looking around, listening, trying to figure out what's going on. They don't realize that at some point they're going to be only 70 nautical miles from one another.
Which, in naval terms, at least in this era, is close.
Very, extremely close, and just have no idea of it because they're not expecting one another to be there.
That crazy.
It's just a weird thing. The poor scouting, that we're going to get into that, because both sides, like you said earlier, with the listening to the operations and trying to break the codes and stuff, is going to play, not knowing that 100% is going to play a major role in how this is going to become very confusing with the scouting in the air and what they're going to see and report and what each side is doing. So,
well, that gets us into really what would be like the first contact between these two opposing sides.
Yeah.
And it's not actually going to happen between the two huge carrier task forces. It's actually going to happen between the Americans' carrier task force and the invasion force that's heading for Port Moresby. So before we get into this, it's important to kind of talk about the commanders, at least for the American side of this carrier task force. So at the time, you had, at least in naval slang, what's referred to as black shoe commanders and brown shoe commanders.
Okay.
Now, black shoe commanders are going to be surface warfare knowledgeable, right? Their experience is going to be in battleships and destroyers and you know, naval ship to naval ship combat.
Old school guys.
Actually, of the 4 carriers, there's only one that isn't a black shoe, and he would be what's called a brown shoe, and who's going to have experience as a naval aviator, and his expertise will actually be more in line with carrier fighting. His name is going to be Aubrey Jack Finch. Fitch, not Finch. Fitch.
Okay, Fitch.
He's a naval aviator. He is in charge of the Lexington, and he ends up, when these 2 carriers combine into one task force, he ends up being the air commander, essentially, the naval air commander. He's in charge of tactically how to employ these air assets, whereas Admiral Fletcher is going to be in charge strategically of everything, right? So he makes the strategic decisions. Fitch will make the tactical decisions on how to employ these aircraft.
That's good.
That all being said, they're not the only aircraft that are going to be involved in this next part of the story. So there will be some Army aircraft that are coming off of Australia. And as they're flying towards, I believe, towards Tulagi, they're going to see the Japanese invasion force heading for Port Moresby. Now, again, they're Army pilots. This is early in the war. They don't really know what they're looking at. So they call in that they see these massive Japanese aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
When in all actuality, it's a very small Japanese aircraft carrier that's just attached to this invasion force. It's not the same kind of aircraft carrier that is now behind the U.S.'s aircraft task force, right? Aircraft carrier task force. When they call that in, at the same time, scouting planes from Admiral Fletcher's task force will be sent in that direction, and they will also see this invasion force. Now, because of code error, right, and how they reported it, Admiral Fletcher thinks that is the big carriers, right? He thinks this is the main element.
Yeah.
And so he sends all of his aircraft. He's like, everybody, spin it up. We're going. There they are. We got them. We got the drop on them. And it's not until he already has them in the air that he realizes that isn't the case. The pilots that saw this, the invasion force, the Japanese invasion force, have made it back to the ship, and they're telling him, no, that's not what we were meaning to tell you. It's a small aircraft carrier with a few other ships. But they've already committed, right? So Fletcher, he sends them on anyways. And this gets us into May 7th, which is going to be, like I said, the first clash between these 2 forces. So there will be 50 aircraft launched from the Lexington at 09:30 a.m., followed by another 43 aircraft from the Yorktown. So this is a massive assault.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when they get there, of course, they do not find 2 massive aircraft carriers. Instead, they find the light carrier SHOHO. Oh, sorry. The light carrier SHOHO. Now, again, she's supposed to provide air support for the invasion force. She's not meant really to fight aircraft carrier battles, right? Like aircraft carrier on aircraft carrier. That's not what this thing is for. Needless to say, they've been given the command to go ahead. And so the Americans start diving on this SHOHO, and they put a wallop on
Everybody
her, man.
wants a piece of this thing.
It's so for all these guys, this is their first taste of combat, right?
Yes.
This is early in the war. They are not experienced. And just like you and me, they are probably itching for it, right? I try to explain this to people all the time, but when you're new, all you want is that first taste of combat. We were actually talking about this the other day because when we went to Afghanistan, I started getting in contact. When I say this, it's like a few days before you did, and you were telling me you were hearing it on the radio and going, man, we're never going to get it. We're just never going to get it.
That's what it felt like. Other squads are,
everybody's getting it, and you're, man, I'm going to miss it, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
made it all the way here.
Needless to say, I can only imagine that these pilots feel the same way.
Yep.
So the SHOHO, now it's arguable whether or not the torpedo strikes actually hit it. It's reported that some 15 torpedoes hit the SHOHO. That doesn't seem to actually be the case. Again, at this time, American torpedoes were very, very defective. A lot of them didn't work. They didn't have very long range once you dropped them in the water. But that is kind of secondary because the U.S. dive bombers, which we'll get into in a second, are armed with 1,000-pound bombs.
Yeah.
And they hit this thing with 13 of them. 13,000-pound bombs on a small aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Needless to say, the SHOHO erupts and sinks within a matter of minutes, taking most of its crew with it.
Yep.
This is the first aircraft carrier that the Japanese has had sunk in this war, including all the fighting they've done up to this point.
Yep.
And just to throw it out there, it'll be 631 of her crew will go down with the ship. So that's a big chunk of Japanese sailors.
That's a lot.
Now, there'll be a lot of excitement, as I'm sure you remember from your first gunfight. You get back, everybody's high-fiving, they're excited, and your reports aren't probably going to be as accurate as they will be in the future. You see an explosion, you see the ship list a little bit from one side to the other, you see smoke, you think, hey, we just sunk this ship, we just did this. They're going to report back that they've done a lot more damage than what they actually have. But the one thing that does make it back is one aviator will radio back, scratch one flat top.
That's awesome.
And he is right in that. Right? Yeah. They did scratch off one flat top.
For sure.
Now, all that to be said, the whole objective of this battle, at least from the American perspective, is to deter an invasion of Port Moresby. Now, we'll get further into this, and ultimately, it will be the Battle of Coral Sea will be a Japanese tactical victory and an American strategic victory, and it's because of this point right here.
That's very interesting.
Because this attack, even though it's against a smaller aircraft carrier, not really the main focal point of the tactical battle, it does deter the invasion force, because after that ship is sunk, the invasion force will turn around and sail back to Rabaul.
Yeah.
Right? So objective accomplished.
Immediately.
Very early on in all this.
Yeah.
But that being said, this is just the first opening. This is the first round of a 12-round fight.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this clip from America Fog of War, catch the rest of the episode here.